we are looking over the next 10, 15 years to a massive hollowing out of jobs, and not just in the working class, but in the middle class.
Why?
Artificial intelligence has finally started to live up to its hype. Now, there are all sorts of ways in which IT has already supplanted white-collar jobs. I used a travel agent all the time in the 1990s because I traveled a lot. And I'm sure she made quite a good living. I also am quite confident that her IQ was just fine, and I wouldn't be surprised if she had a college education, so she made a good living. She was doing a job that required lots of judgments, lots of ability to research various alternatives, and she was earning her money. Around 2003, when Expedia got pretty good and the United Airlines website got pretty good, I gave up using a travel agent. And the actual number of travel agents, I looked it up because I was struck by that, and it indeed has dropped, I think, by more than a third since the turn of the century. But the real big news is this. Are you familiar with the Japanese game of Go?
Slightly, very slightly.
Okay, so you know the chessboard is 8 by 8, and each side has 16 pieces, and the pieces move in a defined way, and it's all very linear. If, then, if, then, if, then. And so, in fact, it took them a long time, but they made really good programs to play chess, and now you can buy one for $35 that can beat the world champion. Fine. Go is on a board that is larger than that and has nodes on it. I'm not sure the exact size, but even small increases produce exponential increases in possibilities. And you just put pebbles on these nodes and different colored pebbles, and the object is to encircle, and it's all very intuitive. So a great deal of intelligence is needed to play Go, but it's way different from chess. And the assumption last year was that it would be another 10 years before a chess program could a program could beat Go. This spring, a program was developed by a subsidiary of Google, who else, that beat one of the leading Go players 4 games out of 5. And the reason why it's worth telling this story is that they didn't teach the program how to play Go. They taught the program how to teach itself to do things. And so what they did was feed the program a couple of thousand games that had been played of Go by senior players. They fed it the rules of Go and said, okay, that's it. Thereupon, the program proceeds to play millions and millions and millions of games of Go and learn from them. And, if I make this move, that out of the 75 million games that I've played, it has this effect on my probability of winning or losing. And you just keep building that up, and the result is it plays world-class Go. That algorithm that says, just let the program teach itself. Imagine applying that to medical diagnosis. Imagine applying that to all sorts of things. And imagine analogous kinds of programs in AI and all sorts of jobs that are currently held by people who make a fairly limited amount of judgments, but demanding judgments, are going to be replaceable by a computer program within that not long period of time.
I guess the conventional
we've been saying that for 200 years.
Right, and they'll produce, other jobs and more leisure and so forth. But
I can't tell you how often I hear that.
Well,
because they have the advantage of having been right for 200 years. For 200 years, people have said, "Oh, look, we're going to automate the mills, and we lose all these jobs," and of course, other things rise up. But with most of those, even though hindsight helps, it is also true if the automobile is coming in, and you do see that a lot of horse drivers are going to be out of a job, carriage drivers. Well, somebody needs to drive the automobile. Somebody needs to fix the automobile. So you could sort of see that. But tell me, when probably within the next 10 years, 4 odd million people are going to be out of work driving cars and trucks because they'll be driverless. It's a whole lot harder to see how that spins off jobs. And as you look at the developments at Google and Apple and Microsoft and the rest, we've had wonderful new capabilities that really have not generated very many jobs.
Right.
And I think basically you're going to make out like a bandit if you have an IQ of 135 and above, and otherwise things are looking pretty grim. Or if you are very conscientious. I will just throw that in since we're talking about jobs. I'm borrowing from Tyler Cowen here. Tyler Cowen points out that we're still going to need nannies for our children. We're really going to need people to take care of our elderly parents. And what do we want for those jobs? First, we want a human being. We really, I don't care how good the robot is. We want a human being. We want a nurturing human being. And above all, we want a conscientious human being who, even though nobody's looking over his or her shoulder, will do a prescribed thing as asked, no matter what, such as administer the pills that are due at 4:30. Now, which gender tends to be more nurturing and more conscientious? Statistically, we have many conscientious men. We have many nurturing men. Statistically, women have a big, big edge. So our white-collar, working-class male has yet another way in which he's going to end up at the bottom of the totem pole.
Oh, that's almost the white-collar, middle-class male, too, though, right?
Yeah.
So you think there you get a kind of a perfect storm of the technology plus the social mores.
Yeah.
Well, that's cheerful.
Cheerful is what I do. You know that, Bill.
Charles, right. No, but that's important. Well, are there any, obviously there's no magic bullets at least, but is there, where would that incline you in terms of, if one had that analysis in terms of policies, either macro or micro?
Well, it's pushed me toward a universal basic income, which I wrote a book on in 2006 called In Our Hands, and which I've just redone with new arithmetic for today's economy. And I think it is important enough that I'll take a few minutes and just tell what's going on with that.
Someone told me that your new introduction to it is very interesting, but I haven't seen it yet. Is it coming out soon? Or?
It's out, yeah.
Oh, it's out.
You can go to Amazon and you can download it in your Kindle.
Speaking of businesses that are destroying
yeah,
a lot of middle class,
right.
but being a bookseller, working in a book, that was a kind of middle class, college educated job, right? Doesn't it?
The examples are legion. Well, the idea of a universal basic income appeals to me in part as a way of solving an economic problem, because as is highly publicized, we are looking at a growth of entitlement spending that is really scary and unsustainable deficits unless we do a major fix. So there will have to be a major fix of some kind, and so I want to draw people's attention now to a quite affordable fix, which will have the advantage of being affordable. That's not really my main reason for proposing it. The basics are this. At the age of 21, every American who holds a passport which is issued at birth and has the same function as an ordinary passport, but also establishes your eligibility as an American citizen for the Universal Basic Income, UBI, starts to receive a monthly deposit electronically to a known bank account of $13,000 divided by 12. $13,000 is the total basic income, of which $3,000 must be devoted to health care, which I'm going to push aside because it's a complicated additional topic. So you have $10,000 of disposable income that you're getting in monthly allotments. Well, I think that there are all sorts of ways to do that which would cause catastrophe. I think if we simply add that onto the current benefit system, it's not affordable and it also is a catastrophe. But what if it replaces everything else? There's no more Medicare, no more health insurance, Social Security. There's no more welfare. There's no more corporate welfare. There's no more agricultural subsidies. I can go through the whole list of transfers. There's none of that stuff, and there's also none of the bureaucracies that administer it. You have $10,000, and you say, well, you can't live on $10,000. Well, if you really want to live all by yourself, no, you'll live a pretty grubby existence on $10,000. You get a minimum wage job, just a minimum wage job, and you work 2,000 hours a year at, let's say, $750. That's $15,000 plus 10. That's $25,000. Yeah, that's way above the poverty line. Well, suppose for some reason you can't work, or just suppose you don't want to work. You can still have a decent existence if you're cooperative. If you're cooperative enough to convince a friend, a girlfriend or boyfriend, a relative or something else to pool your resources, if you just do it with 2 people, you got 20. With no working whatsoever, you got 30 if you got 3 people. You add a little bit of income and you're in the middle class. That $10,000 given to everyone has a huge effect on their ability to live a decent existence by doing reasonable things. But it also has, I think, a couple of other huge advantages, again, because of some features of my specific plan, which I'm quite proud of. One is right now we claw back benefits at a very low rate, so that if you're on food stamps and Medicare and you take a job, you very soon face a very punitive loss of benefits. I say, look, you keep your entire $10,000. We don't claw back a cent of it until you have $30,000 in earned income. Once you have $31,000 in earned income, you'll pay $50 or some very minor clawback, and that'll increase as your income rises. But I'm really saying to somebody who's gotten up to $30,000 of earned income, okay, you now got a net of 40. You really want to quit work and go back to 10? Yeah. I'm luring them in to work until they can't quit. And the other thing that I really like about it is that it reverses some really terrible incentives. For example, the people who do not work because they're afraid of losing their benefit, that all disappears. They go to work, they're pure profit for them to go to work, whereas now it can be very punitive. The second thing is, consider the classic case of the young woman who has a baby and no husband. Well, it is a statement of fact that under the current system that generates an income stream she would not have otherwise had. I'm not saying she has the baby to get the income stream. I'm saying it does generate an income stream. Under the plan I'm proposing, she has an income stream. The baby is going to be a major drain on that income stream. Now, that can also be good. All of us who have children have a major drain on our income streams as a result that we're delighted to have. But it does get the incentives right. I really want a baby. I know I'm going to be paying for diapers and baby food and all that, and I still want the baby. Okay. But if you've got the income stream and you say, gee, do I really want to spend it on those kinds of things? Or do I want to spend it on some more education or better clothes or something? That gets those incentives right. And I'll add one other incentive it gets really right, which has to do with men who walk away from their children. I am not a big fan of demonizing single women. I understand all the reasons we want to hesitate at that, even if we think the women have made a wrong decision. I don't see a thing wrong with demonizing single men who walk away from children. I'm very easy with that. Well, we have child support laws in place. We have DNA such that all you need to get is a swab, and you can have absolute certainty of paternity. And we've got an electronic bank account known. All the judge has to do is garnish a certain amount of money from the man to support his children. You think that will get around? You think other men will know that that's happening? You think that maybe that just might make them think twice before they father a child they don't plan to take care of? I'm quite enthusiastic about those incentives.
Could it happen? I think part of it could. I mean, the Medicare stuff strikes me as hard because
the medical thing is hard.
Because people think that's a separate category.
Yeah, and you know where I'm willing
catastrophic costs and so forth.
Where I'm willing to compromise is in the medical side. I mean, the reality is we run an idiotic medical system, and part of the things I go through in the book is to point out to people: do you realize that the costs of ordinary medical care, the kind that are 90% of the reason we go to doctors, should have been going steadily down over the last half century, the same way that the costs of everything else have been going down? But because it is sui generis in so many ways, I'll say, okay, let's put aside medical care and talk about the rest of this. But I guess I want to add on to this kinds of specific benefits I've talked about, something that just might make a difference to white-collar guys who can't get jobs, and to a changing job market, it has a good chance, and I will express it that way. I can't be sure. It has a really good chance of revitalizing America's civic culture. The idea is this. You have people who are not going to use their money wisely. We all know that. And they're going to smoke it up or drink it up or whatever. And so it's going to be the 18th of the month, and they're down and out. Well, how are they going to survive to the end of the month? They got to go to somebody, but there's no government agency to go to anymore. Those are all gone. So they got to go to the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the sister, the brother, the relative, the friend, or whatever.
Church
or the church.
Local,
In each of these cases, the situation has been fundamentally changed. Right now, that person can present himself as being a helpless victim. So many strikes have gone against me in life, and much of which may be true. But when there's another $800 hitting the bank account in 2 weeks, the dialogue changes. We're not going to let you starve, but don't tell us you're helpless. You aren't helpless. We know what your situation is. It's time for you to get your act together. And now take these kinds of interactions and multiply them by tens of millions. And think of all the ways in which, if there are not government agencies to do things, that philanthropic efforts which have been diverted away from those, as we know from scholarly work, they have been diverted away. What happens if they are diverted again, and we get to the whole issue of my own very deep belief that human needs are solved best at the lowest possible level, that the government is a blunt, extremely inefficient method for dealing with human needs, that American history is replete with real brilliance in our ability to use civic culture to meet human needs. So that's my baby when it comes to trying to solve some of the problems that I've been talking about.
That's good.